Adam, thank you so much for being on the Ivy podcast. It's such a pleasure. And yeah, thank you for taking the time to be here with us.
Thanks, Caesar. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. You and I go back, I think about 7 years now, when we're both part of Starting Block Fellowship. And I remember that I started following your work and you did a Kickstarter for your book, right? And that's when I got hooked on Adam's work and millennials, right? So with that said, right, for people in the audience that might not be familiar with your work, would you mind just giving a little bit of background on, I guess, why you became, you made that your mission to work on millennials and engagement and belonging in the workplace?
Sure. So yeah, we met at Starting Block. For those that don't know, Starting Block is a leadership development program, mostly for young professionals, for folks of all ages now, but the majority of folks usually are in their 20s and 30s, folks starting their careers and figuring out how to work with impact, how to make a social impact. So I went to that program in kind of a crossroads in my career, right? I was working in Washington, D.C. for a job for the federal government that was great on paper, but really wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And the truth is, I really didn't know what I wanted to be doing. I just knew that I wanted to make a change and I wanted to switch things up and do something that felt more personally impactful to me. And I was almost 30 years old. So I was actually probably one of the older people in the room at Starting Block. But what's really interesting in Starting Block is that you're around all these people, young people, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 22-year-olds that are starting businesses, that are making career changes, that are, solving all of these major global challenges. And it's really powerful to be in that space. So that was kind of a wake-up call of just, whoa, what am I doing? I can make a change, right? I can do something different. And it was being in that space, I call it kind of a space of believers, right? Which I think is actually kind of at the core of all the work that I've done, since finding believers, finding a community of support, finding people that want to not just kind of say, great job, check a like box on LinkedIn or Facebook, but actually are going to support you in getting there. Are actually going to believe in the beauty of your dreams. So that's where my kind of light bulb moment was of, okay, I can make a change. I know I want to be doing a lot of writing. I know I care a lot about young people that are kind of going through the similar thing I was, this quarter life crisis, trying to figure out who they were, what they believed in, how to make a living, how to actually get paid to do something that you care about, paid to do not just do what you love, but do something impactful that's actually helping people that are in need or helping people that are less privileged than you. And that's kind of where that was born from. All I knew in that room and after that program was, I'm going to leave this job. I'm going to leave DC because I just didn't really want to be there. I'm going to move to California because I always wanted to live in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And I'm going to start writing. That's pretty much it. But what happened is that kind of launched this whole new life for me, this whole new, I didn't realize it was a career at the time, but what it launched was kind of an identity of being, in touch with myself and starting to express myself and go after what I was looking for. And I started blogging about it and meeting a lot of other young people, other young professionals and millennials that were going through pretty much the exact same thing I was. So I kind of realized, whoa, I'm not alone in this. A lot of people are kind of going through this, quarter life crisis, third life crisis. What does my life mean? Really looking for purpose and meaning in the workplace, and that there was something there. There was a generation. I mean, everyone wants that a little bit, but there was a generation that was basically demanding it and actually going to quit their job if they didn't find it, or if they weren't aligned with their company or their company's values, or if their company was, not treating the planet well, or not treating people well, or doing something inappropriate, or not taking care of society at large or their culture. And I started writing about it, and that's where it started. And I really didn't, now I'm a global speaker. I speak about this at companies, but the truth is I just started writing about it. and not much for much money. For those of you listening, writing doesn't pay very well. And like you mentioned, I did a crowdfunding campaign to raise money to write this book, The Quarter Life Breakthrough, because that was my only option. You know, I didn't have a big enough following to get a book deal. I wasn't established. I never really published in, you know, any reputable websites or publications or blogs. I just had my own little WordPress blog. And, you know, the only option really was self-publishing. And in order to self-publish, you need to hire an editor and a cover designer and, you know, get someone to help you. So I said, okay, cool. I'm going to raise some money to do that. And I did an Indiegogo, which is like Kickstarter campaign. And it raised over $12,000 from over 500 people. And I think 30 countries or something like that, 40 countries. People I'd never even met before. Yeah. Right. So definitely some of those people were starting Blog Fellows or my friends or my family or people that were really knew me. And then there were all these people. I'm like, Kim in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Who the hell is that? Right. Yeah. And so a pretty remarkable thing happened is, I started to find those believers. I started to find kind of that momentum. And that's kind of defined my work, is looking for people that are also going after their dreams, that really believe in that sense of support and community. If you're putting out a creative project, you know, helping someone, donating to that project, connecting them to someone that can, you know, might be their cover designer or might know a literary agent or might have a good book for them to read or a resource or a blog post that's going to have helpful tips. And that's kind of how I've gone for the past, I guess it's been 9 years. And now it's a business. But, you know, I think that's for entrepreneurs listening, we all know that it's not that simple, right? You know, I think it's easy to look at my path and be like, oh, he was a writer and started a speaking business about millennials in the workplace. Like, you know, it started at Starting Block. It's like, well, actually, you know, it was, you know, 9 years of ups and downs and starts and stops and trying a lot of different things. I didn't even know public speaking was a business. I don't even think I knew a single, you know, besides Oprah or, you know, Tony Robbins. I don't think I knew that public speaking was a thing, right? I wasn't that plugged into that world. But I slowly started to realize as I was talking about my journey and talking about millennials in the workplace, that there was a lot of interest there and that other young people were going through it, as I mentioned. And also, most importantly, companies and organizations were struggling with attracting millennial talent, retaining millennial talent, engaging millennial talent, and creating a culture in their company where people would want to show up, do meaningful work, be excited to work, stay at their job longer than 6 months, right? Because turnover is incredibly costly for organizations, right? Millennial turnover alone costs US companies $30 billion a year.
Yeah, it's a high cost.
It's one of the highest costs that companies face is recruiting, training, and then having someone leave in 2 or 3 months. It's really, really bad. So I realized that there were a lot of companies that were kind of like, okay, how do we get these people? How do they find us? And how do we create that culture where we can provide learning and growth and diversity, inclusion, belonging, and this kind of sense of community and purpose that millennials are looking for. So that kind of became my work. And again, I didn't know that was a job when I first started, but you know, when you start going after something you care about, things open up, you start having those conversations and you make more connections and you learn more and you put yourself out there more and you write more and you speak more. And, you know, if people like what you have to say, good things can happen.
Yeah, it's I'm someone that I've been following your career pretty much since the beginning, right? With your first book, and I'm impressed at everything that you have accomplished. But the thing that's more impressive to me is that you had the courage to look within first, right? Like, why am I unhappy? Why am I unfulfilled? You look for believers, right? As you mentioned, and then you start to put yourself out there, and other people that resonated with your work started to, get closer to you and resonate with your work. So, and of course, you leverage the tools that are out there today, right? Back then, Kickstarter, having a blog, right? So all those things, I think nothing has changed, right? Like if someone wants to get inspired by the work that you've done, I think they can pretty much do the same, right? Start a blog, raise funds for your project, right? So
Do a Patreon or
yeah,
Substack or
exactly. And so throughout your work, right? Because I know that you've spoken at multiple companies about millennials and engagement, retention, how to attract them. What are some of the things that you've noticed that companies get wrong when it comes to millennials and engagement?
Great question. Yeah, I think that usually people think of it as a surface level thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the pool tables and the ping pong tables and the kombucha on tap and the
Right.
beer on tap and the cold brew coffee and the cushy chairs and the bean bags and light bright colors on the walls,
Yeah.
right? And that kind of thing. Oh, millennials, they want to,
Oh, the
play
perks.
the perks and the playpen, but what they forget is the deeper meaning and the deeper purpose. Generally, then the research shows this, what people are looking for is a company that is doing something important in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? That has a real why, that has a purpose, and that folks are coming on board to support that purpose, and they can clearly articulate how what they do reflects that why. And there's alignment between kind of the personal, the team, the company, the organization. It all makes sense, and they really know why they're doing what they're doing. That's the deeper meaning. And also the community piece, right? Again, you can have the furniture and the food, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not what it's going to make people someone stay at their job, right? No one needs a place to have a haircut or dry cleaning, right? If anything, those things are just making people more miserable because they have to stay at their job till 8 p.m. and they don't get to go have dinner with their family, their partner, see their kids, right? It's like, well, I have to, scheduled, an appointment later at the office. It's like, why are you at the office at 9 p.m.? But the deeper thing is being around really interesting people that are diverse and innovative and creative and getting to have real conversations and have kind of a place of education and growth, right? Learning and development, I think, is a key piece for what millennials are looking for, because they're living in a world that's changing so quickly.
Yeah.
Right. Especially also you think about the next generation, Gen Z, which is now joining the workforce in mass. These are folks kind of born after, 1997 or so. So the oldest ones are in their early 20s, just kind of joining the workforce. Think about how unstable the world has been in the last, let's say, year or 4 years, or, we've got climate change, we've got polarization, our political situation, people not talking to each other, the pandemic, income inequality, the fight for racial justice. People are kind of joining a world and becoming an adult in the world that is very rocky,
Yeah.
very rocky, very unstable, very sometimes unsafe for many people. Changing very quickly. Technology is changing so quickly. We have AI and I think it's very easy for people to get anxious and overwhelmed and stressed and come to a workplace that doesn't see that or doesn't provide space for that. For people to actually talk about their feelings, to talk about feeling overwhelmed, to talk about the fact that the average one of someone from their generation is going to have 15 or 20 different jobs in their lifetime. No one wants to talk about that, but that's the data. That's the truth.
Yeah.
That there's going to be a lot of, trying new things, evolving, doing multiple careers, multiple jobs, and maybe that's okay. Not like you're going to quit your job tomorrow, but you're probably not going to be at this job forever. Let's provide room for you to grow, room for you to get training and skills, become a better person, become a better communicator, a better leader, a better manager, and provide that space. I think, go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was just going to say that's very important, because let's say you just hire someone and in 6 months, right, this person has achieved whatever metrics and goals they have. And maybe after those 6 months, they're looking for opportunities to continue growing, right, to continue developing, right? And if the organization doesn't provide that, then this person, I mean, it's happened to me, right? Like this person can quickly become disengaged, right? Not really excited because they feel like they've hit this plateau, right? So I think it's important, right, to be mindful of that, because in a world where things are changing so fast, right? Like you could sometimes people get hired and the job description change between the time that they were getting recruited to the time they're starting on the job, right? So it's a tricky equation. It's a tricky balance to strike, right? But so important. Now Adam, I know that you have an upcoming book, right? Friendship in the Age of Loneliness, where you dive deeper into the topic of loneliness, and also provide some advice on a personal level, but also in the workplace, on how to mitigate this loneliness, right? What are, during the research for the book, and let me go back and just preface it with loneliness. It's something that if someone in the workplace, let's say, feels lonely, this person is not gonna be engaged with their work, right? So it really affects that engagement level. So what were some of the things that struck you as oh wow, this is important, right? Well, when you were doing research for the book, right? Because I know that you read multiple books on the topic. What were some of the things that struck you while you were doing the research?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is just how prevalent this issue is.
Mm-hmm.
Nearly 2/3 of Americans are experiencing loneliness, right? And that number has gone up from 2018 to 2019, the last year we have the data.
Yeah.
This was pre-pandemic.
Wow.
2/3 of Americans, right? And the loneliness, I think it's 80% of millennials and 70% of Gen Zers. Excuse me, 70% of millennials and 80% of Gen Zers are lonely, right? So usually we think of older people as the loneliest. It's actually the youngest people are the loneliness. Wow. The loneliness. Loneliness levels out when people are kind of in middle age, which makes a little bit of sense. Maybe you have your family, you know who your friends are, and then it actually goes up again once people are about over the age of 75. So just how prevalent an issue it is, and also how deeply connected it is to our health, right? There was an amazing study at Harvard that showed that basically social relationships are the key to a healthy life, right? There's a great TED Talk by Robert Waldinger from Harvard Medical School, and he talks about the people that had the satisfied relationships at the age of 50 were the healthiest at age 80, right?
Oh, that's interesting.
Those who had warm relationships lived longer and were happier, right? So people who are more socially connected live longer, enjoy stronger brain function, experience fewer health problems, and retain sharper memories. There's another study that shows that social support increases our survival by 50%. It turns out to be as powerful as giving up smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
So you could be a healthier person if you smoke 15 cigarettes a day and had lots of friends and social interaction than the person who didn't have any social interaction.
Yeah. Well,
that's so scary and so sad to me, right?
It is.
And then if you look at the data around friendship, the average American hasn't made a new friend in the last 5 years. 3/4 of people are unsatisfied with their friendships. 200,000 people haven't talked to a close relative or friend in over a month, including a family member. It makes me quite sad, and it's a real issue. I mean, it's been called the loneliness epidemic for a reason. Again, this was pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, before a year where we're not even allowed to mostly to see people in public besides with masks on or with one other person taking a walk. This is a huge issue. I actually think it's one of the main issues of our time. And so, especially for young people, especially for people that are spending more and more time on social media and technology, we have to talk about it more. We have to address it.
Yeah. So with that,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, with that point, right? 'Cause if we are more connected than ever because of technology, why do you think we're longer than ever? Like, what are some of the causes for this?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that, tech addiction is a really big issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially for young people, we're seeing that social media addiction has been linked to rising rates of teen anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
depression, even suicide. The suicide rate for young people aged 10 to 24 increased by 56% between 2007 and 2017. For
Wow,
children
that's a
aged
big
10 to
jump.
14, for children 10 to 14, it tripled,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a direct correlation here between kind of when people started using iPhones and the smartphone
Mm-hmm.
and social media. So yes, technology brings us close together. That's how we're having this conversation. People have
Yeah.
been using Zoom to connect or FaceTime to call their grandmother. That's great. And there's another side of it that's kind of, hey, this is not the only thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is not enough to get the dopamine, the oxytocin we need from actually being with people and having real relationship. There's an element of this that's physical and biological, of being with someone, of a physical touch, of touching them, of giving them a hug, or feeling like they care about you, or hearing their voice, right? Or corresponding with them
Mm-hmm.
and getting that kind of friendship and connection at a deeper level. Technology is not enough. Um,
Yeah.
and I
So.
think that that's really, really important, especially for young people to remember. Um, you know, it's, these tools can help us. I have a section in the book that kind of talks about apps that help us make new friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some amazing apps out there that can help us connect, and I know a lot of people are using Clubhouse now, and
Yeah, it's a big one.
there's a, people, it's up there and people are using it, and that can be great. And I think that we need to remember that, this is not gonna,
Mm-hmm.
give us the kind of friendship that we're looking for. It can be part of it, right? It can keep
Mm-hmm.
us in touch, but that there's an element of this that I think comes back to kind of how we used to be. If you think about human beings and evolution,
Mm-hmm.
our evolution is we're social people. We're social
Mm-hmm.
beings. We
Yeah.
survive by being in a tribe, right?
Yeah.
By literally a village, by being like, oh yeah, those are my parents. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
elders. We stay safe here. That's what keeps us safe,
Mm-hmm.
by being together. And we've kind of lost that, because we're like, well, and I felt this too. I have 4,000 Facebook friends. I'm good. It's like, well, why am I feeling lonely?
Yeah.
Why do I
Right.
feel like I don't have anyone to talk to right now?
It's an
Right. I
issue.
have all these Instagram followers. I've got people I follow on Twitter, but like, they don't care about me. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they do, but they're not here right now. And they didn't write me a note to tell me, and they didn't bring a cake to my birthday party.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
So
it's so true.
I think that that's why I wrote this book, was remembering,
Mm-hmm.
there are many things we can do to
Mm-hmm.
cure loneliness and talk about it more, and
Mm-hmm.
make it less stigmatized. But I also wanted to make sure that friendship was a big piece of it. People focusing on their friendships and spending
Mm-hmm.
more time on their relationships, and realizing that those little things that we kind of think of as, oh yeah, I host a gathering, or
Mm-hmm.
even a Zoom gathering, or have a weekly dinner party, or have a boys' weekend with my best friends, every for a weekend in July, or a girls' night, or whatever it is. That's the good stuff,
Yeah.
right? And to spend more time there. We're spending 50 minutes a day on Facebook and Instagram, and we're only spending 4% of our time with friends.
Yeah, no, it's a real issue, right? And I think right now what adds a layer of complexity is COVID, right? And the pandemic, and we're still not on the other side, right? We're still navigating through it, and there's a lot of people that are working remotely. Um, so for those people that find themselves, doing remote work, let's say if I'm the VP or the manager, right? What are some of the things that I could do to make sure that my team, my staff, do not feel lonely?
Yeah, and I think it's really important to note that, obviously I'm not telling people to go, hang out and high five, or have a dance party, or go to a club. or go to a live music. Please
Yeah.
don't do that. Stay safe. But I think creating a culture of human connection in the remote workplace is really important because remote work isn't going anywhere. A lot of the data shows that people actually want to continue working remotely even after COVID, even after it's safe to return to the office. 90% of employees, I think, want to have remote work at least a few days a week, or have the option of it part-time, which makes sense. Actually, folks have been more productive in many ways. Some people, and depending on what they do and their function, some people really want, I don't think remote work's going anywhere is kind of what I'm getting at. I think it's going to be a hybrid model moving forward. So we're going to have some people coming in on a regular basis or a couple of days a week, and some people working from home, especially for distributed teams. So we need to kind of create ways for people to kind of constantly have that connection. So I think building rituals is really important, right? Even at the start of a meeting, just going around and having people share something that's going on in their life, sharing what's up, sharing both personal and professional. So you're having kind of personal and professional mentorship. So not just kind of, hey, let me tell you about a skill I learned or something I know,
Right.
but hey, a trip I went on once, or a book I just read, or a podcast I love, or an article I read, or something going on with my family, or something I just want to share. That's going to help people get more connected. Doing more team building and more kind of icebreakers and games and creating that culture of play and curiosity, I think is really great, keeping people fresh, encouraging more chances for renewal and breaks and rest and exercise, because I think people are going through a lot right now, and just meeting them where they are is really powerful. Opportunities for learning and growth in the remote workplace. Not making it mandatory, but providing chances for people to learn from guest speakers, or take an online course, or kind of really expand their minds and learn new things is wonderful. When it's safe to do so, creating those moments of retreat, and you can do this virtually too, where people kind of come together and they have that they still feel like they're a part of that kind of office culture, once a month. And it's not just all work, right? Okay, let's come up with our strategy for quarter 2. Well, maybe it could be more like, let's just come together and have time to chill, kind of like have the virtual water cooler going, right? Have time for people to give updates in small groups, and have people to kind of do ask me anythings, or have the founders or executives kind of take questions and create that conversation. Appreciation and gratitude, having ongoing places where people can still give that praise. Maybe it's a Slack channel, right? If you're using Slack, or, another software for folks to stay connected, where people can be like, hey, Cesar, great job in that presentation. Or you really, you're doing great with the report, or I just want to acknowledge this person, right? We could all use that right now. Or, simple things like a gratitude Fridays, feedback Mondays, whatever it is, where you're just kind of creating that regular heartbeat of connection, and letting people kind of not feel lonely, and letting them know that you care about them. Even ways of if you have budget for this, getting small gifts, little gift cards. I'm not talking like buying something a flat screen TV, but a gift card to their local coffee shop, or a restaurant in their neighborhood, or doing something special for their birthday. Just kind of remembering, oh yeah, we're people, we love each other, we're here, I miss you. Just saying I miss you. Hope all's well in Texas during the power outage. Hey, I hope you're doing okay, with the fires. I hope you're doing okay. I know you've got 2 young kids at home that you're having to deal that aren't, are doing remote learning all the time, right? Just reaching out and letting people know that you're thinking about them is really, really powerful.
I love all the tips that you mentioned, because it's true, right? Like all of those contribute to fostering that environment of trust and engagement, and basically creating those spaces, right? And taking those actions from a place of generosity. And so let's say I'm a so let me preface this, because before the interview today, I stumbled upon someone on LinkedIn that posted how she had to make a hard decision between taking care of her dad, who eventually died from COVID, and her job, right? Because her job wasn't flexible to her doing remote work. And she didn't know how to, or she didn't feel like she could, share her struggles, right? So what advice would you have for someone that is in the workplace, but they don't feel like there's that trust where they can just be transparent with what's going on, in their lives, right? What would you say to this person?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think that it's not the person's responsibility. It would be the leadership and the kind of company culture to have, have that trust and sense of empathy, and psychological safety built in of like, hey, we know this is a really hard time. We know
Right.
people are going through a lot. Here's our expectations of what we expect. And here's, if you need some help, if you're going through something, if there's a family emergency, if just naming it, if you get COVID, if your family member gets COVID, here's how we can approach that. And here's the flexibility and kind of the understanding that we're going to offer. I think that that's really, really important to kind of set from a kind of top-down culture perspective. Because then to put that onus on the person of, hey, this is your responsibility to navigate feels a little bit, doesn't feel empathetic to me.
Yeah. And it's mind-boggling that it still happens, right? With everything going on, and with everything that we know about loneliness and lack of engagement, I think people in leadership roles really need to take this seriously, right? Because it affects everyone, right? It affects whatever happens in your personal life. It affects your work, right? And sometimes vice versa, right? So it's important to make sure that the whole person is taken care of, and not just parts of it, right? It's not just about the OKRs or whatever, goal you're trying to achieve, but it's about the whole person, right? And part of that is belonging in the workplace, right?
That is belonging. Belonging is caring more about your people and making your people feel at home, and caring less about kind of, your KPIs, the OKRs, the numbers that you presented, last December to the staff meeting. Who cares? Like someone's going through something right now. And if you care about your people, you'll hit the numbers, right? That's kind of obvious, right? If you invest in your people, if you have empathy for them, if you support them through this, challenging time, they're going to be more productive. They're going to do more work. They're going to be more excited and a more engaged employee, right? Employees who have a best friend at work are 7 times more engaged, right? Yeah. So there's and there's also data that shows that employees who have a relationship with their coworkers outside of work, so they have that they're actually friends and they're not doing work or they're not on the clock. They actually are better employees, and they are they're more productive when they do work. So it's in your interest to foster that connection, to foster that belonging, to make people more excited, to connect people, to bring people together, because it's going to lead, it's everything, right? Especially right now. I mean, this is stuff that should be timeless, but especially during a pandemic, especially during a moment when people are really hurting and struggling so much.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with having a friend at work. I mean, I have experienced that myself where, if we feel like we're friends, I'm more engaged with what I'm doing, right? Even if it's hard, even if it's a task that I don't feel too excited about, but if we're doing it together, and there's that sense of belonging and friendship, it's different, right? So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. What would you say are some of the misconceptions or myth around loneliness, that people have, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a different one thing that I learned that I kind of didn't know the science behind it, but was that the difference between kind of loneliness and social isolation, they're actually very different. Both can be not good for your health, but social isolation, like you can be isolated and not feel lonely, right? Like you could be like, I'm taking some time away from friends or people, and I'm just going to write, or I'm going to go move to a cabin in the woods, or I'm just taking some time for solitude and being alone. But loneliness is actually the subjective perception between your desired level of connection and your actual level of connection.
Wow.
Right. So it's different, right?
Yeah.
They're related, but different, right? So meaning you can be lonely even if you have lots of friends or social connections. That's what I think I really learned. And I was like, oh, that's me, right? I'm a very social person. I'm happy. I'm positive. I'm out and about, before the pandemic and my normal life, I'm traveling a lot. I'm meeting new people and I'm making new connections and I'm adding friends or adding followers or whatever, but I can still feel lonely because it's not what my desired level of connection is.
Wow. That's so important.
Right. And I think that makes me realize why maybe some of the numbers are so high and why this is more of a very almost universal issue and why we should talk about it less kind of like something's wrong with you. Oh, you're lonely. Oh, lonely. Right. I remember when I was pitching this book, the publisher initially didn't like the title because they didn't want loneliness to be in the title.
Why not?
Because it would scare people off. Because no one wants to pick up a book that's like, oh, loneliness, I'm lonely.
Yeah, no,
because then you're like judging you don't want to write something that's judging the reader, something's wrong with you. You need this.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, well, actually, that's what the book is about. I'm dealing with this. That's why I wrote it. I'm pretty sure 2/3 of Americans are also dealing with it. Let's just name it and make it less. It's not a problem. Like something's wrong with you. Let's just something like we're all talking. Let's talk about it more and be open about it. So I think kind of destigmatizing a little bit and normalizing it and making it part of the conversation, I think is helpful. And I think when I came into the project, I thought of it again. I thought of it as like, ooh, I gotta look. Ooh, I'm kind of feeling lonely.
Yeah, scared of being judged.
Something's wrong with me, or I need. This is, I don't want to talk about it. And then kind of maybe more like, hey, let's make this more of a thing.
Yeah.
That was definitely something I learned, and I think that sometimes people kind of don't miss that a little bit. And then the other thing was honestly, that the technology piece is complicated. I think, so I think that when I went into the project and, my preface and my introduction to the book is kind of technology is not helping here, right? The tech addiction is a big issue, especially for young people, both millennials, Gen Z, but also really for teenagers and folks with young kids. This is a huge issue, right?
Yeah.
People spending more time on their screen than being with their families, not knowing how to have a real conversation. The data around teen anxiety and depression and suicide, and young people are using. I think it's 90% of 18 to 29-year-olds regularly using social media. Half of teenagers using the internet almost constantly. Which is alarming. But I actually found in my research that, tech addiction is a thing. It's not helping, but there's also a lot of technology that is actually being used to connect people and bring people together and actually fight loneliness. And especially for people that maybe have trouble leaving their home or going or becoming or not socially active, or maybe are older. There's a lot of really great apps and platforms out there that are actually using technology to bring people together. And I interviewed a woman who got chronic Lyme disease at one point. And, she was able to meet all these other people that had Lyme disease through kind of a Facebook group and Instagram, someone's Instagram. And she met all these people that then helped her kind of figure out a solution that, her doctors couldn't provide. So she met all these people going through it. And then she credits it with basically saving her life and allowing her to find you know, find her health back. Right. And there are, you talked, so I think it's not easy to just say technology is the culprit, you know, quit social media, get offline, go hug your friends. That's a part of it. It's a balance, right? These tools are going to be, you know, they can provide good, like in the pandemic, we've seen this, right? You know, Zoom happy hours and, you know, Netflix parties where someone can watch a documentary with their best friend that's across the country, WhatsApp chats to share recipes, you know, using Marco Polo, you know, to take, you know, share photos back and forth of what you're cooking, or, you know, apps that are connecting seniors and elders to people to pick groceries up for them, right? Because they don't want to go outside because of the pandemic. It's not a simple thing, right? It's not technology is good, technology is bad, right? Because you also don't want to go too far in the direction of, let's build another app to connect people. And then you're like, oh my God, here we go, you know? So that's something that we don't have an exact answer for, right? Building better technology, designing better technology is important. But it's a yes and it's something that we're going to be navigating, you know, in the future as we continue to enter into the digital world. I wanted to kind of write a book that kind of addressed it, but also didn't prescribe this or that, because it's a little bit of both, and we're all living it. We all know it's a little bit of both, right? I know that, you know, you and I probably do maintain a relationship a lot online because you live in, you know, in Austin, I live in San Francisco. We don't see each other often.
Right.
That's great. Right. And that's going to be, that's awesome. And, you know, we need to have more in-person connection and high kind of more depth with a few people in our lives and figuring that out. And kind of, if we're going to be living meaningful social lives in the digital age, we have to kind of navigate that. We have to take that on to figure out, what does that balance look like? How do I reach out to more people? How do I talk to more people in my neighborhood? How do I know who my close friends are? How do I stay in touch with people that are far away online, but also analog? And that's part of this. That's part of this kind of struggle and question and challenge for us. So I wanted to write a book that kind of helps people kind of think about that more and gives them some tangible ways to approach it.
Yeah, I really love that you mentioned all those apps that really empower us to connect and communicate. And even here in the neighborhood where I live in Austin, we leverage the power of Facebook groups and Nextdoor. Last question here to bring it home. Because what would be the number one takeaway that you would like the audience to take, you know, that are listening to this episode, and they want to feel more belonging and less loneliness at work?
For specifically related to work.
Yeah, in the workplace.
Yeah. Great question. Let me think for a moment. I would say let people know that you appreciate them. If you just spent some time, spent an hour, spent a couple hours, you know, writing a handwritten note to, you know, 10 of your coworkers, 20 if you have a lot, and letting them know why you appreciate them, or something that they did in the past year that made you, that impressed you or inspired you. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think we don't do that enough, and I think that's really important right now.
That I love that you mentioned that, because I've done it myself. Right? I know the power that appreciation and gratitude can have, not just on you, but on someone else. And when they least expect it, like, oh wow, Smiley sent me a note and I wasn't expecting it. So, you know, that's very powerful. And if you can do a note because you're doing you know, remote work, then an email or an e-card, right? Whatever the case is. But I think that's important, and it's a habit, right, that we can cultivate.
Yeah.
Awesome, Adam. All right, last question here, and this is something that I always like to ask all of my guests, and that is, what is the one book that you recommend to people? And more specifically, because I know that you read tons of books on the topic, but if you had to pick one book that could be like a quick start or that made the most impact on you while doing research on loneliness, what would that book be?
Yeah, that's a good one. I read a lot of books, and they're all kind of very different in this study. I mean,
or it could be two or three. You don't have
yeah,
to do
no,
one.
I'll say that I think that the book that kind of made me start thinking about this in the first place was Johann Hari's Lost Connections. I had seen his TED Talk, and he's kind of a journalist. He writes a lot about depression.
Mm-hmm.
And he was basically kind of writing about how the way we treat depression and mental health is just wrong. And that the opposite, he has a line that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
I like that.
And so the book kind of was what made me start thinking more about loneliness. And it's several years old, but it's really beautiful and powerful. And I had a friend recommend that I read it a couple of years ago, and it's really kind of got me on this journey. And there's a lot more, because I was writing about friendship, about tech, about loneliness, kind of trying to combine all of them. But I think he's done probably some of the most important research on the topic, and has really kind of brought it into the mainstream in a really powerful, beautiful way.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure to check it out and put it in the notes. But Adam, this has been an awesome conversation. It's great that we're addressed this topic, that we need to talk more about it, right? Loneliness and engagement in the workplace. And I'm really looking forward to having you in future episodes to dive deeper into other topics. But for now, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. Great to see your face.
Thank you.